Hi, I'm Goodwin. If you just met me today, you might have noticed that I was working the room to lower expectations about this talk. As the kids say, I did not understand the assignment because I had a lot of slides, but I'm going to breeze through them, okay? But I am very excited to be here and to talk about the role that school psychologists have in supporting students who have learning differences. And I think traditionally, we think of learning differences as almost an analog for learning disabilities, but learning differences are inclusive of high ability students. Let's see. Okay. Oh, come on, John.
It's not you, John.
Okay. And so this is kind of an outline of what I'm going to do. All right. So my question, and it's a rhetorical one because I don't have time, is what is giftedness, right? And is giftedness a dirty word? There's a lot of controversy about this term because when people think about giftedness, it almost sounds like it's innate, it's immutable, it's fixed, and you either have it or you don't, right? And the field is moving towards talent development, but we're using this term giftedness, one, because we do have a federal definition, and the field is still pretty much predicated on this term, okay? In 1972, Congress had commissioned Sidney Marlin to basically survey what is the state of gifted education in the United States. And we had our first definition, right, which is here. And there were 5 areas. The 2 that are highlighted in this kind of traditional way that we think about giftedness is intellectual ability and scholastic aptitude or academic aptitude that is exceptional, okay? Twice exceptionality is a more modern view of learning differences in that it's almost a paradox of strengths and weaknesses or areas of need. So these are high ability students or gifted students who may have one or more areas of disability as defined by federal criteria. And so these are some of the areas. There are some very well-known examples of gifted and talented individuals who might have physical or sensory disabilities. We can think about Stephen Hawking. We can think of Helen Keller, Stevie Wonder, right? There's not much research out there about this form of twice exceptionality. The bulk has focused on either mood or emotional or behavioral disorders or neurodevelopmental disorders, including learning disabilities, but also autism, social communication disorders, etc. It's important because these are students that are underserved, and we don't have many federal resources to support twice exceptional students in particular. There's also an emerging role for school psychologists, and so part of what I want to do as a teaching professor is advocate for the role that school psychologists can have in supporting all learners. I ran through this. The big thing I want to emphasize is PL 94-142. Who was around when that came out? Okay. Now that is audacity. High five, right? But what is so important about this is that this was broad civil rights legislation, right? That said all students should have access to a free and appropriate public education. And its most recent reauthorization was IDEA 2004. Now we are 20 years from that and we have not had any substantive changes to that, which I'll talk about in a bit. The reason why, though, is you can blame Congress. And then ESSA is one of the few sources of funding for gifted research, particularly Jacob Javits grant. With California, which is really where my work comes in, California is a little weird when it comes to gifted education. Recently, I joined California Association for the Gifted as an executive board member, and I'm the only school psychologist. And as I've educated myself on the state of gifted education in this state, there is no mandate for gifted and talented education. And so what happened is that it is really contingent on the district to either identify or serve high ability, gifted, talented, whatever term they have, for these students, right? And because it's districts and not the state that has a mandate, really the resources are disproportionately derived from the resources of the community, right? And I know there are a lot of homeowners here who really do like Prop 13, right? However, that has had significant implications, not just for gifted education, right? But in the 1960s, California was rated #1 in the country in terms of funding per pupil. Post 1978, it's much lower, towards the bottom, right? So what do school psychologists do in supporting? One is in identification, right? I'll talk about this later because I didn't understand the assignment. And part of that assessment includes review of records, being comprehensive. There might be testing as well, behavior rating scales, measures of development, and adaptive functioning, okay? Now, here's a big question that I know a lot of you don't know. What is a school psychologist? I'll tell you, I've been a school psychologist for quite some time, and sometimes I have to figure out, like, how do I explain this, right? Well, let me tell you what school psychologists are not. They're not school counselors. They're not clinical psychologists. They're not educational psychologists. They're not school social workers, although there's overlap in a lot of the areas of interest and even practice of all of these professions. School psychologists are mental health professionals. School psychologists are trained to work with students really birth to 22, right? And although traditionally linked to special education, and that is a common role that they serve in, they can and should serve all students. And here's a beautiful picture of the NAS practice model that underscores consultation, mental health interventions, academic supports that are part of the role. I mentioned FAPE, and this is what is of paramount importance when we think about our high ability students, is the role that school psychologists can have is one with identification, identifying these students, consulting with teachers, other support personnel, parents, right? Advocacy for appropriate services and supports. I think this is a big equity issue. And then intervene to redress both scholastic weaknesses, but also to nurture strengths, okay? There are several special education disability categories. Which one here is mutually exclusive? I see Dr. Sharkey has an idea.
Intellectual disability.
Intellectual disability, right? Definitionally, a high ability student probably can't meet criteria for intellectual disability at the same time. But otherwise, twice exceptional students can qualify for any of these other categories. There are some evidence-based interventions for high ability students. One of the most effective is actually academic acceleration, and you can do whole grade acceleration, but there are other accelerative interventions, everything from early entrance to subject acceleration, which can really benefit our twice exceptional students who might, for example, demonstrate mathematical precocity, but may have language-based disabilities, right? It doesn't require many resources, and it can really just involve scheduling changes. Enrichment programs tend to be more resource intensive, but can be very valuable and helpful for our high ability students so they can get some differentiated instruction, right? And because of the pacing of high ability students, you don't want to review previously learned material. These students can benefit from individual and group counseling. I love to do bibliotherapy groups actually with some of my high ability students. Very, very powerful. Accommodations within the classroom and broader scholastic environment. And there might be a need for more intensive academic and or behavioral interventions. And so that intensive support can go up to tier 3 in special education. Lastly, just another plug on the variety of different accelerative interventions. You may not have thought of these as accelerative interventions, but they are, right? Early entrance, advanced placement, anything that will truncate or accelerate the time that a student spends within the educational system. So, school psychologists are very important, right? And they can support, yeah. And they can support the diversity of learners, right? And I strongly advocate for more involvement in supporting our high ability students. There you have it.